on the market, but to do something new. And it took DARPA its own sweet time, and finally I queried DARPA, and I queried, and finally I said, I wrote an email, and I'll show you the email on the video, saying to DARPA, you know, this is treasonous, give me a response. When I said that, somebody took notice, I guess because military and treason, they have the Military Code of Justice. Anyway, over at DARPA, the lady comes back and first she says, there's all kinds of things like that out there. And I said, I'm sorry, but there's nothing like that out there. I've done my patent research. And so she comes back and says, well, the second review panel says it works and you should send it off to TSA, and she gives me the addresses of the people to send it to TSA. Now, the person I'd been in touch with at DARPA was named Mrs. Jacobs, and she told me to be in touch with Mrs. O'Sullivan at TSA, telephone number 202-493-1253. And so I sent the stuff to TSA after Mrs. O'Sullivan told me where to send it. But I have the receipt that government received the material. I have the certified mail that shows that DARPA got the information. Now, it was very strange. In this period of time while DARPA was trying to decide whether the system worked, and if you're a scientist and physicist, you should have been able to decide it after reading the material, which was descriptive of exactly how the system worked, and integrated in air traffic control, and integrated with the Northern Command, and integrated with the GPS, satellites, ground beacon radio radar systems, and integrated with the plane. So they should have been able to understand that it worked a lot quicker than it took them. But in between, all of a sudden, I see in the news that somebody had come up with an automated anti-terror system that controlled planes and took them out of the hands of hijackers. And I said, whoa, you know, they're not mentioning me. And they were mentioning a Dr. Lee, who was supposed to be the foremost in this field of research. Dr. Lee works at Berkeley and worked for NASA, and I believe worked for Boeing. I don't recall that for sure, but I can look that up. Anyway, I said, oh, somebody's trying to snag this. This is why it's taking so long at DARPA. And I wrote Dr. Lee, and it turns out that some very strange things had happened. First of all, the newspaper article said pretty much that, you know, Lee's working on this system, finishing touches type thing, you know, but it's in the process. When I was a little suspicious and a little freaked out because, you know, you want credit for your good works and your ideas, and I wrote Dr. Lee, he started off by saying, you know, anything that you came up with should be just given to government. Well, that's not really how it ever works. There are corporations like Northrop Grumman, like Boeing, like a number, all kinds of corporations that come up with intellectual property and market it to government and produce their good defensive or offensive systems for the government's use, military. And somebody's supposed to hold title, and it's the guy who builds it, you know. It's the artist or the designer or the scientist who comes up with the new product or system. So I thought that was a little strange, and I said, well, look, Dr. Lee, why don't you, I'll send you my stuff. Why don't you send me your stuff, and we'll see if we're talking about the same stuff. And he said, okay, and he sent me, and I can show it. I've also got that on file. I've got tons of stuff on file. I'm just trying to give an overall right now. He sends me his paper. Well, it turns out his paper had something like, at that time, 4 or 5 mathematical equations with a theory. And these mathematical equations were, it turns out, not my system, but not developed at all. In other words, he had like 3 pages with 4 or 5 mathematical equations that had no bearing on a final product like my product was a final product. None. And indeed, I wrote Dr. Lee back and I said, I apologize. I guess you did have something, though really it looked like the kind of thing you did in World War II, misdirect, mislead, because there was nothing to his paper. There was nothing there. Anyway, I have the paper, I can show it to a jury. Several months later, or maybe a year or so later, I looked again at his paper. There are a couple more pages. And again, his system wouldn't even have worked, because he would have had to configure his system for each individual type of plane, and there's no way it would have worked. Still, I'm sure it's not even working. However, my system, the hardware and software, was available on the market when I came up with the idea. So I sent this stuff to DARPA, I sent it to TSA, and it disappeared in TSA. I asked TSA, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And DOT, FAA, and I was told each time it's gone up the line. Well, I'd taken some courses a number of years before, a 3-day seminar, in fact, on how to contract with the U.S. government. And the way you contract with the U.S. government is the agency that you approach with something you want to sell, be it your services or your intellectual property or hardware or widgets, whatever. You approach a contracting officer and you say, I want to sell it. And the contracting officer says, well, we'll think about whether we want to purchase this. And then they decide if it's of interest or not. And if it's of interest, the contracting officer brings aboard his contracting officer's technical representative, also known as a COTAR in the government speak. And the COTAR and the contracting officer sit down and put together a proposal. And you either have a request for a proposal or you have an unsolicited proposal that comes out of that collaboration. And if it's a unique product, like my anti-terror system, where nobody else can really bid on it because they don't have the rights to produce, then you get your unsolicited proposal if the government is interested in purchasing your product. But I was never directed anywhere towards a contracting officer. I asked where happened to the stuff. Is there a contracting officer I can speak with? I was told it's gone up and down, up the line. And then TSA got incorporated into Homeland Security, so different authorities all of a sudden. And I got nowhere. The good news was that I'd found the laws by this time that says, upon the request of the person or entity affected, the head of the agency, being government agency, shall make a hearing available where you can present witnesses and so on, and if government wants to hold on to something that they have of yours, that they will make an adequate payment, compensation. And again, I will show you all of these laws when we start going into actual documents that show receipt, breach, etc. Because what I'm getting to is I've lost all my constitutional rights. I have been savaged. I have been chained, caged, lied, denied all of the basic protections of the Constitution, habeas corpus, the right not to be lied about or have false evidence introduced into court by people, the right to have due process upheld, not sabotaged. And I will show what it really comes down to is who done what to whom and who built what. And I can present it in terms of acts and